Hi, I'm Ken from Colorado Youth Outdoors. Welcome to the CYO fly tying tutorials. We hope that these short videos help you take the skills you learned here back to your house so that you can continue the creative activity of tying flies and building relationships with your family and friends. Now we're going to tie the Swift Beetle. It's another dry fly that sits on the surface. We named the Swift Beetle after Louis Swift because of his generous donation that provided the Fort Collins campus to our community. Our first item is the hook. The hook we're using is an Umpqua U-Series model 001. And in this case, we're going to be using a size 12. The thread that we tie on is UTC 140, and the 140 in this case is colored in chartreuse. The color of these beetles can be varied at the discretion of the person tying the fly. Next, we're going to use 2mm foam to make the body, and we're going to cut it out with a River Road Creation foam cutter. Our body will be made of chartreuse ice dub, although a large variety of any kind of dry fly dubbing or ice dub could be used for this fly. Last thing we're adding to the fly are the medium round rubber legs, and that'll be a new technique we'll learn as we learn how to mount those legs on the fly. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we've got the 140 UTC thread, and like other flies, we're going to apply the thread the same way. This is a little bit heavier thread. It's nylon instead of Dacron, and it's a flat thread. So this thread is particularly good for tying any kind of fly where we're going to have a body made of foam. This flat, heavy thread is nice because it doesn't want to cut through the foam. Works great. First thing I did is just put down a thread base onto the hook, and then I like to take that material back, take that thread back to roughly the middle of the hook shank. And we'll go ahead and get our foam body. We've done a little advanced homework, so we already have this nice body uniformly cut because we used the foam body cutter. Really a cool trick. You ever go to the store and wonder why all those flies look so uniform? It's because they cut these bodies with a special cutter. This small end right here is what we're going to tie down onto the hook shank. So we're always working on being better at thread control. We try to keep our bobbin with about 1 inch of the hook, and we want to go ahead and load that bobbin a little bit by rotating it counterclockwise. It's going to make it really easy to come over the top of that foam and tie down that material to the shank of the hook. One thing I've noticed with this fly is you definitely want to come to the rear of that hook shank and tie down a fair amount of that body, even beyond that little tie down tab when you start this fly. So I'll tip the vise so you can see it, but you can see I've run my thread just a little bit into our foam body, and that's going to make this fly look really great. I'll go ahead and wrap to the rear now. We've got the body attached real nice, and we're going to dub the body. I've got myself some chartreuse ice dub. And you can remember from other flies we've done, we just want to use a little bit of this at a time. So I take a few little pieces of this material, not very many, and we're going to wrap them onto this thread. Ice dubbing is kind of a crinkly, dry material, so it's not all that easy to dub with, but one thing I tell everybody that comes to CYO is if you can dub with ice dub, you can dub with any kind of dubbing. And so that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and I'm making the dubbing noodle and try to keep it kind of tight and thin and as even as we can keep it. And as we get it ready to apply, we'll go ahead and wrap it around our fly here. And we're going to go over the top of that foam part that we tied down. And what I tell people is we just want kind of a nice, even diameter body for this fly. Usually we're trying to wrap dubbing so that it gives us sort of a taper for the body in many cases, but really the silhouette of this fly is going to be based on the shape of that foam body. So this particular material is actually just providing material to tie the foam to and to anchor our rubber legs. So good chance to do some dubbing. You guys can remember possibly from dubbing other flies that we're just rolling those fibers between our thumb and forefinger and wrapping it around that thread. Then once we come up onto the hook, we're just watching sort of the diameter of that body, and we're trying to keep it fairly even. And I tell people sort of a moderate diameter body is kind of ideal for the Swift Beetle. You don't want super skinny, but you don't need to have it really big and fat either. So as we get the dubbing on there, we'll wrap it onto the hook. And in this case, this might seem a little counterintuitive, but we're going to wrap that body all the way up towards the front of that hook shank, and then we're going to come back just a little bit as well, and that's where we're going to tie in our legs next. So, you know, probably 70% of the time making this fly is just practicing your dubbing and then wrapping it on there with just a little bit of tension. And you'll see we're actually coming back here just a little ways and making sure that we have that whole body about the right diameter. You'll see we'll have some crazy little fuzzies sticking out of here, and that's nothing wrong with that. All right, now I'm going to position my thread about the width of an eye back from the front, and we're going to attach the legs. I've already pre-cut some of this material. You saw we were using this medium round rubber legs, and when you cut them off of the material that you buy, they're going to kind of look like this, and all you do is pull them apart with your fingers until you get a single rubber leg. So you'll remember anytime we hook something on, we either pinch wrap or we load the bobbin. I like to load the bobbin here, and I'm actually going to show you 2 different ways to attach these legs. So with my loaded bobbin pretty close to the fly, I'm going to go around the body of the fly, and all I did is grab that rubber material, and I'm going to pull and wrap it a couple times, and I'm going to tip the vise so you can see. That wants to bite down into that body a little bit, but since we tied it pretty tight with a couple layers of dubbing, it doesn't go too deep in there. Keeps kind of a nice shape to those legs. All right, now I'm going to take that thread to the other side, and I'm going to show you a different method. You can actually take these legs, put them behind the thread, and then just lift them up onto the body of the fly, and they'll just stay there for you, just with the weight of that bobbin. So you can kind of play around with this. I always tell people not to get too stressed about everything being perfectly uniform with foam bodies and rubber legs, because by their nature, those 2 materials are just a little bit disorderly. All right, now our last step is to take that body, and we're going to pull it over the top, and you'll notice there's kind of a narrow area in the shape of that body. We're going to pull this over the top, and being careful to keep that thread in the same groove that we used to put our legs on, we're going to snug up that thread onto the foam body. It's much better if you can pull that thread towards you. In other words, go around that body a little bit light and then pull it tight towards you while you're holding the body, and that will help you center and keep that foam body nice and leveled up on the top. This is another thing a little bit different. Instead of trying to pull under all this material, this flap of foam and these legs, we find for our kids it's much easier to just whip finish this fly right over the top of that tie down. So we still have our triangle, but we're actually just taking that thread. I'm having to give myself a little more thread with the bobbin. We're going to go 4 times over that, and then we'll remove the whip finisher the same way we always do, and then pull a little bit of tension onto the bottom, and I'm going to come up in there and cut off that tag end. So for the most part right now, this fly is done. But it's always nice to kind of trim up both the front of the fly and the rubber legs and get them nice and even. You can come in here with your scissors if you want to make the head of that fly just a little bit smaller. And then to make sure you keep the legs the same, just hold them together, cut them off with your scissors while you hold them together. You end up with nice even looking legs. The top of the fly looks like that. The bottom of the fly looks kind of like that. And that's a finished Swift Beetle. This is probably one of the most productive flies that we fish with here at Swift Ponds and throughout the CYO system. This little dry fly thrown onto the surface, you can put a little floating on it and just twitch this a little bit in the water. And we've had great success catching bluegill and certainly bass as well on the Swift Beetle.